3 astronauts bound for the Heavenly Palace. That's China's space station still under construction. From a launch pad in the Gobi Desert, the rocket ship dubbed the Divine Vessel blasting off. Designed to arrive at its destination in just 6.5 hours. But at a total length of 55 feet and a living space of just 50 cubic meters, these astronauts are going into orbit in a capsule a bit larger than a city bus. Any claustrophobic thought? Surely forgotten when the men do 2 planned spacewalks to install equipment on the exterior of the space station. Inside, they'll test the tech in the living area and run experiments. 2 more laboratory modules expected to be launched in upcoming missions, with the aims to have its space station fully operational by the end of next year. China wants its own because the U.S. government barred it from participating in the International Space Station project. China says their Heavenly Palace will be truly international.
Foreign astronauts are certainly going to enter the Chinese space station one day. There are a number of countries that have expressed a desire to do that, and we will be open to that in the future.
In just the past 7 months, China has put a rover on the moon and one on Mars, becoming the second country in history after the U.S. to land a rover on the Red Planet. They also plan to send humans to the moon in the 2030s. But for now, these 3 men will spend 3 months building the foundation of the space station.
We will obey orders and instructions and keep calm while meticulously carrying out the mission.
Chinese experts likewise confident in this mission and its safe return to Earth, as the vessel carries precious cargo, along with the pride of a nation rapidly advancing its work in this new frontier. Becky, you might recall last month China faced a lot of criticism, namely from the U.S., with a out-of-control rocket that was returning to Earth and was feared going to cause some damage or even harm. Well, it didn't. It splashed in the ocean. Nonetheless, they certainly redeemed themselves with this precision-perfect launch today, and the mission that is underway now and going to last 3 months. You got to think about the timing of all this. This is happening just a couple of weeks before this country will celebrate the Chinese Communist Party's 100th anniversary. That's certainly being talked about online here.
Fascinating. David, thank you. Well, China has made extremely heavy investments in realizing its space ambitions, from its first satellite launch in 1970 to successfully putting a rover on Mars just last year. You can see just how much money it is investing compared to the other major space players. An $11 billion budget, according to the latest data, way ahead of Russia or China, for example. Its goals are lofty going forward, not only aiming to fully crew its own space station by 2022, but also putting a Chinese-Russian base on the moon by the 2030s. It's also aiming to crew missions to Mars by the year 2050. Well, my next guest co-chairs the bipartisan U.S.-China working group. The group was the first foreign delegation to visit the launch center in the Gobi Desert, where this latest launch took place. He was also a U.S. congressman chairing the House Subcommittee on Aviation, Democratic Representative Rick Larsen, joining me from Washington, sir, and it's terrific to have you. China now has its own space station, more than a dozen other countries involved in the ISS, the International Space Station. From the U.S. perspective, how much of a threat regarding national security or otherwise is this extremely ambitious Chinese space project and this new space station that was built and will be run by China?
I think that the United States and the rest of the world needs to look at space as a place that where there's as little conflict as possible. So I think there's room for the U.S., China, Russia, and others that play in space to really come together to ensure that space ambitions aren't any more a threat than they are today. And it should not come as a surprise what China is doing. As you noted, I was at the Jiuquan Space Launch Facility. I think it was 2009, middle of the Gobi Desert. They have three major space launch facilities in the country. It's a top flight, literally top flight facility. I've been to their astronaut training facility. in China. There's the U.S. had tried to stop this from happening through sanctions in the early 2000s, but it's clear that China's making this investment.
So, I mean, there are claims that it's Washington's fault that the US and China aren't working together in space. The Americans and the Soviets managed to work together on space projects during the Cold War. Do you think there are opportunities for the US and China going forward? After all, David Culver pointed out in his report that foreign astronauts are likely, or certainly are invited to enter the CSS in the future.
Yeah, I remember. I think I was 9 or 10 when the Soyuz space capsule went up, and there was some cooperation. And you know, at the most in the early 2000s, mid 2000s in Congress, I and a Republican, we were only trying to get the United States, Russia, and China to design a common docking facility, just in case there was a necessity to rescue astronauts in space stations, just so that the docking rings matched up regardless of what country. But we couldn't even get here in the United States, get people to do something as simple as that. We weren't talking about joint missions. We weren't talking about sharing technology, just the joint docking in the event of the need to rescue people in space. And Congress wasn't willing to go that far.
Do you see that as a big loss? You know, you've said, you know, it would be, you know, we should look for opportunities to work with China in space. We hear a similar rhetoric from Washington about working with China in climate change, around the climate crisis. And there will be those folks who are watching this today who say, it's fascinating to hear Washington look for opportunities, as it were, in inverted commas, to work with China when it suits them, but not across trade, tech, various other things, where we are seeing, and we've seen this with Joe Biden's recent trip to Europe, where China was very much in the crosshairs, the metaphorical crosshairs, talking about how we counter China going forward.
There are areas where the United States and our policies here and the Chinese government policies will be in conflict. Will be in competition. Trade is an area on the economic side. There are other areas as well. There are areas of cooperation as well. I can think about on North Korea, on climate change, on international terrorism. On this issue of space, there is a way to approach this so that the science and technology sort of stays inside the science and technology box without sort of getting outside of that, where it becomes national security issues for either country. But we would both benefit from some cooperation in space. But again, I think it will probably be, if it does happen, would it happen inside some sort of prescribed set of boundaries that prevent national security issues from becoming too much in the forefront.
A couple of other questions for you, very briefly. Do you see a conflict between the very sort of, I don't want to call it bellicose, but the very, very sort of noisy rhetoric we hear from Washington with regard China and countering China's growing influence, not least in the field of tech, and U.S. business, which is very much looking to China as a growth opportunity going forward? And I'm thinking about, you know, the big finance houses, for example.
I think that where the U.S. government policy under the Biden-Harris administration and where U.S. business can come together is in the area of what we're trying to do here at home. The U.S. Innovation and Competitive Act just passed the Senate. We're trying to do something similar here in the U.S. House of Representatives. And this would be a major investment in the basic infrastructure, research and development infrastructure, in the roads, bridges, highways infrastructure here in the United States, to ensure that we have our own economic house in order. I just talked with AmCham, American Chamber of Commerce China, this morning about these issues, this morning DC time, about these issues. And, you know, we're all in agreement that getting our own house in order is part of being competitive vis-a-vis China. And the U.S. business community is foursquare behind those efforts.
Very briefly, bipartisan members of the US House will introduce legislation this week to boost US support for Taiwan. How do you plan to boost support while avoiding driving a wedge even further between Washington and Beijing at this point?
Well, I don't think the Biden-Harris administration has been at all coy or shy about demonstrating to the Chinese government and Chinese leadership that we're going to stand up for our values and our interests and approach those in a way we think is appropriate. And that's through working with friends, partners, and allies in the region. And we'll also include ensuring that we have a strong relationship with Taiwan. I also think that the Biden-Harris team has their eyes wide open in this regard as well, understanding that the Chinese government may respond in some way, but are willing to deal with that response in an appropriate way through diplomacy and dialogue. And that's what we would call upon. I'm pretty sure they'd call upon the Chinese government to respond in that manner.